The idea that a simple $1 coin could be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or even close to $1,000,000 sounds unbelievable to most people. Yet throughout American history, small mistakes, limited production runs, and overlooked details have quietly turned everyday pocket change into life-changing discoveries. And nowhere is this more true than with the United States presidential $1 coin program. Launched in 2007, this ambitious program was designed to honor America's presidents while encouraging renewed interest in circulating coinage, but what few people expected was that it would also create one of the most fascinating modern treasure hunts in U.S. numismatics. These coins were mass-produced, handled casually, spent without a second thought, and in some cases ignored entirely by the public, yet hidden among them are rare variations and minting errors that collectors aggressively compete for today. Some of these presidential dollars were struck with missing inscriptions, others with doubled lettering, inverted edge text, wrong planchets, or transitional errors that escaped quality control, and because millions were released into circulation, many of these valuable examples were never discovered at the time. Instead, they slipped into change jars, bank rolls, vending machines, and forgotten drawers, where they may still be waiting today. This video is not about fantasy or exaggeration. It is about documented auction sales, verified mint errors, and real presidential dollar coins that have sold for extraordinary prices, proving that even in the modern era of advanced minting technology, mistakes still happen, and when they do, they can turn ordinary money into extraordinary wealth. To understand why these coins matter, it is important to first understand how the presidential $1 coin program worked. Unlike traditional U.S. coins, these dollars featured edge lettering rather than inscriptions on the face of the coin, meaning that important information like the year, mint mark, and the phrase "In God We Trust" was stamped onto the coin's edge after the coin had already been struck. This additional step created a completely new opportunity for errors to occur, and in 2007, those errors appeared almost immediately. Millions of George Washington presidential dollars entered circulation without any edge lettering at all, instantly creating one of the most famous modern U.S. coin errors. These coins became known as godless dollars, not because they were intentionally altered, but because the edge lettering process was skipped entirely. At first, many people dismissed them as damaged or defective, but collectors quickly realized they were legitimate mint errors, and demand exploded. Prices climbed rapidly, and even today, high-grade examples certified by major grading services can sell for thousands of dollars, especially when preserved in uncirculated condition. But the Washington dollar was only the beginning. As the program continued, additional errors surfaced across multiple presidential issues, including Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, and others. Some coins featured doubled or overlapping edge inscriptions, while others displayed inverted lettering, meaning the text appeared upside down relative to the coin's face. These may sound like minor details, but in numismatics, small variations can create massive differences in value, especially when the error is scarce, visually dramatic, and easy to explain to new collectors. This combination of rarity and recognizability is what drives prices upward, and it is why certain presidential dollar coins are now considered modern legends within the collecting community. Among the most valuable and sought-after presidential dollar errors are transitional and mule errors, where coins were struck using the wrong dies, wrong planchets, or incorrect production sequences. These are exceptionally rare because they usually require multiple failures in the minting process to occur simultaneously, yet when they do happen, they create coins that should not exist at all. In several cases, presidential dollars have been discovered with features that contradict official mint records, sparking intense interest from collectors and researchers alike. These coins are not only valuable for their rarity, but also for the questions they raise about how such mistakes manage to escape detection in a modern minting environment. What makes the hunt for these coins even more exciting is that many were never pulled from circulation. Unlike classic gold or silver rarities that were recognized immediately, presidential dollar coins were widely ignored by the public. Many Americans disliked the coins, preferring paper dollar bills, and as a result, millions sat unused in vaults or were spent without inspection. This widespread indifference created the perfect conditions for rare errors to go unnoticed, and it is precisely why collectors. As the presidential $1 coin program moved beyond its first release, collectors began to realize that the George Washington godless dollar was not an isolated incident, but rather the opening chapter of a much larger and more complex story of modern minting errors. And at the center of that story stands the Thomas Jefferson presidential dollar, a coin that quietly became one of the most searched modern U.S. dollars ever produced. Released in 2007, the Jefferson dollar was struck in enormous quantities, yet a small percentage left the mint with edge lettering errors that transformed them from ordinary coins into highly desirable collectibles. Unlike the Washington errors, many Jefferson dollars featured doubled, overlapping, or partially missing edge inscriptions, creating a chaotic appearance where phrases like "E pluribus unum" and "In God we trust" appeared stamped twice or misaligned. These errors were visually striking and easy for even beginner collectors to spot, which dramatically increased demand. Coins with strong, clear doubling on the edge lettering quickly rose in value, especially when authenticated by major grading services, and some pristine examples have sold for thousands of dollars at auction. What truly elevated the Jefferson dollar into legendary status, however, was the discovery of inverted edge lettering varieties, where the orientation of the edge text appeared upside down relative to the obverse portrait. While technically a minting variation rather than a mistake, the rarity and confusion surrounding these coins caused prices to spike, particularly during the early years of the program when collectors and dealers were scrambling to understand what had been released into circulation. Following Jefferson came James Madison, whose presidential dollar further proved that edge lettering errors were not random flukes but systemic vulnerabilities in the production process. Madison dollars have been discovered with partial edge inscriptions, missing letters, weak strikes, and in rare cases, completely blank edges similar to the Washington godless dollar, though far fewer examples are known to exist. Because the Madison dollar did not receive the same level of public attention as the Washington issue, many of these errors slipped through unnoticed, making high-grade examples significantly rarer today. Collectors who specialize in modern error coins actively seek Madison edge lettering mistakes, and auction prices reflect that scarcity, particularly for coins preserved in uncirculated condition. The value of these coins is not driven by hype alone, but by documented population reports that show just how few have been certified relative to the massive number originally minted. Perhaps even more intriguing is the James Monroe presidential dollar, a coin that represents the turning point where error rarity began to intersect with serious collector money. Monroe dollars are known for some of the most dramatic doubled-edge lettering errors in the entire series, with inscriptions that appear stacked or repeated so clearly that they can be read without magnification. In some cases, the edge lettering was applied twice at slightly different angles, creating a ghosted, shadow-like effect that is immediately recognizable. These coins are exceptionally scarce, not because Monroe dollars were produced in low numbers, but because the specific error combinations required to produce such doubling are rare. When high-grade examples surface, competition among collectors can be intense, pushing prices into the high four figures and beyond. In a market driven by both scarcity and visual impact, Monroe era dollars sit at the top tier of modern presidential dollar desirability. As the series continued, John Quincy Adams' presidential dollars introduced another layer of complexity to the error landscape. Some Adams dollars were discovered with missing or weak-edge lettering, while others displayed misaligned inscriptions that wrapped unevenly around the coin's edge. What makes Adams dollars particularly interesting is that several documented examples surfaced years after their release, reinforcing the idea that valuable presidential dollars are still being found long after leaving the mint. These delayed discoveries fuel ongoing interest in roll hunting and estate searches, as collectors realize that time does not necessarily eliminate opportunity in the modern coin market. Each new find adds credibility to the belief that additional undiscovered rarities may still exist. Beyond edge lettering, the presidential dollar series has also produced planchet errors, where coins were struck on blanks intended for other denominations or compositions. These errors are extraordinarily rare and often require expert authentication, but when confirmed, they command astonishing prices. A presidential dollar struck on a foreign planchet, a wrong metal composition, or an experimental blank instantly becomes a one-of-a-kind or near-unique artifact. These are the types of coins that cross from hobbyist collecting into serious investment territory, drawing interest from advanced numismatists and institutional buyers alike. While such errors are not common, their existence proves that even in the era of computerized minting and automation, human and mechanical mistakes still occur, and when they do, they leave behind physical evidence that can be worth a fortune. What ties all of these coins together is not just their monetary value, but the way they redefine what modern collecting can be. For decades, many believed that all the great U.S. coin rarities had already been discovered, locked away in museums or private collections, but presidential dollar errors challenge that assumption. They demonstrate that rarity is not limited to ancient history or precious metals, and that modern coins, produced within living memory, can still surprise the market. This realization has shifted the mindset of collectors, encouraging a new generation to examine their change, study minting processes, and understand that opportunity does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as an ordinary dollar coin, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. As the presidential $1 coin program matured, the nature of its most valuable coins began to shift from widely noticed circulation errors to far more elusive and sophisticated mistakes, and it is at this stage that the hunt becomes truly serious. By the late 2000s and early 2000s, the United States Mint had improved quality control procedures, meaning fewer errors escaped into circulation, yet the mistakes that did slip through were often far rarer and far more valuable. This period gave rise to some of the most intriguing presidential dollar varieties ever documented, including proof strike errors, die cracks, off-center strikes, and transitional anomalies that blurred the line between accident and artifact. Among these, proof-only presidential dollars stand out as especially important because they were never intended for everyday use and were sold exclusively to collectors in limited quantities. When a proof coin contains an error, it creates a perfect storm of scarcity, demand, and desirability, as collectors know that such pieces were likely identified and destroyed before leaving the mint. One of the most discussed examples involves the John F. Kennedy presidential dollar, released in 2014 as the final issue in the series. Because Kennedy's coin was struck only for collectors and never released into circulation, any deviation from perfection carries enormous weight. Documented examples with weak strikes, edge lettering anomalies, and die defects have sold for staggering prices, not because they are flashy, but because they should not exist at all. In numismatics, rarity born from contradiction often commands the highest premiums, and Kennedy presidential dollars embody that principle perfectly. During this phase of the program, collectors also began paying closer attention to die states, subtle changes in coin appearance caused by wear or damage to the dies used to strike them. Die cracks, die breaks, and cuds became increasingly valuable when identified on presidential dollars, especially when paired with edge lettering irregularities. A coin that exhibits both a face strike error and an edge inscription anomaly represents multiple failures in the minting process, dramatically increasing its appeal. These compound errors are among the most sought-after modern varieties, and while they may not appear dramatic to the untrained eye, experienced collectors recognize them as evidence of a unique production moment frozen in metal. Such coins often trade privately rather than at public auction, making their true market value difficult to track but undeniably high. Another category that gained attention during this period is the wrong planche presidential dollar, a type of error that requires extraordinary circumstances to occur. These coins are struck on metal blanks, intended for other denominations or compositions, resulting in differences in weight, thickness, and sometimes color. Because modern mints are highly automated, wrong planche errors are usually detected early and removed, making any confirmed example incredibly rare. When a presidential dollar is authenticated as having been struck on a wrong planche, it effectively becomes a unique specimen or one of only a handful known. Such coins are eagerly pursued by elite collectors and can command prices that rival or exceed classic U.S. rarities, proving that modern coins can stand shoulder to shoulder with historic issues in terms of value and significance. As awareness of these rarities grew, so did the culture of roll hunting, a practice in which collectors search unopened bankrolls for valuable coins. Presidential dollars became prime targets for this activity, as many banks still held large quantities that had never circulated widely. Stories began to emerge of collectors finding missing edge lettering coins, doubled inscriptions, and even off-metal strikes years after the program had effectively ended. These discoveries reinforced the idea that the market for presidential dollar errors was far from exhausted and that patience, knowledge, and persistence could still yield extraordinary results. Unlike traditional treasure hunting, this form of discovery requires no metal detectors or remote expeditions, only careful observation and an understanding of what to look for. At the same time, grading and authentication became increasingly important. As values rose, so did the number of altered or damaged coins being misrepresented as errors. Professional certification by trusted grading services became essential for establishing legitimacy and protecting buyers. Coins that once might have traded casually among hobbyists were now being slabbed, cataloged, and sold alongside high-end collectibles, signaling a shift in how presidential dollar errors were perceived. No longer dismissed as curiosities, they were recognized as a legitimate and growing segment of the numismatic market, attracting investors as well as collectors. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this phase in the program is the realization that rarity does not always announce itself immediately. Some of the most valuable presidential dollars were not recognized as special until years after their release, when patterns emerged and collectors connected the dots. This delayed recognition adds an element of mystery and possibility that continues to fuel interest today. Every newly discovered error not only adds to the historical record, but also raises the tantalizing question of what might still be out there, undiscovered and unrecognized, waiting for someone to notice a small but meaningful difference on the edge or surface of an otherwise ordinary coin.